I didn't notice it the day it started. That's what keeps bothering me. Because if something ends loudly, you can at least say, there. That was the moment. That was the shift. That was when it changed. But this didn't change like that. It thinned. Quietly. And by the time I understood what I was feeling, it had already been happening for months. I became someone she didn't need updates from anymore. And I didn't even realize that was what I'd lost. We met in a way that didn't feel dramatic at all. A friend's birthday dinner. Long table. Too many voices overlapping. Half the people talking about work like it mattered more than it did. I sat across from her at first. We didn't talk much. Just small things. Passing the salt. Making eye contact when someone told a joke that wasn't funny. Later, when the group split into smaller conversations, we ended up next to each other without really deciding to. I remember how easy it felt. That's the word I keep coming back to. Easy. Not electric. Not intense. Not overwhelming. Just comfortable. She asked questions that didn't feel like interviews. I answered without editing myself. At one point, she told me something small about her day. Not important. Just something mildly annoying that had happened at work. And I remember thinking, she didn't have to tell me that. But she wanted to. That mattered. In the beginning, she told me everything. Not in a dramatic way. Not like confessions. Just updates. I stopped for coffee, and the barista spelled my name wrong again. I saw the weirdest dog on my walk this morning. I think my boss is in a bad mood today. Little fragments of her day that didn't carry meaning on their own. But together, they built something. I was there while her day was still unfolding. I didn't just hear about her life later. I moved through it with her. She'd text me during lunch. Call me in the car. Send me a photo of something random she passed on the street. It wasn't about the content. It was about the instinct. I was the first place her thoughts went. And I don't think I understood how rare that is. When we moved in together, it felt natural. No big conversation about what it meant. We were already together most nights. Combining rent just made sense. The apartment was small. The floors creaked. The kitchen barely fit both of us at the same time. But it felt like progress. We built routines quickly. Sunday groceries. Weeknight dinners around the same time. Watching shows neither of us paid full attention to. I remember thinking how stable it all felt. No chaos. No uncertainty. I thought that meant we were doing it right. And maybe we were. For a while. I can't pinpoint when the updates started slowing down. At first, it was subtle. Instead of hearing about something when it happened, I'd hear about it later. Oh yeah, this weird thing happened earlier. Earlier used to mean immediately. Now it meant hours ago. I told myself that was normal. When you live together, you don't need constant texting. You'll see each other later. That made sense. Until I realized I wasn't hearing about some things at all. Not because she was hiding them. Because she didn't think to tell me. That distinction is hard to admit. There was a day that sticks with me. I came home from work and she was already there, sitting at the table. She looked tired but calm. We talked about dinner. About whether we needed anything from the store. Later that night, she mentioned casually that something big had happened at work. A shift in her department. A conversation with her manager that might change her role. It wasn't small. It was something that would have once triggered a midday call. And I said, wait, when did that happen? This morning, she said. Morning. And I hadn't known. It wasn't anger I felt. It was something softer. Like I'd missed a step in a dance we used to know by heart. After that, I started noticing patterns. She still told me things. But they felt summarized. Condensed. Processed. Instead of calling me while something was unfolding, she'd tell me about it after she'd already formed an opinion. After she'd already felt the feelings. I wasn't inside the moment anymore. I was receiving the recap. And I tried to tell myself that was fine. Maybe this is what long-term relationships look like. Less urgency. Less constant sharing. More independence. I wanted to believe that. At some point, I realized I was doing it too. Something would happen during my day, and instead of texting her, I'd think, I'll tell her later. And later would come, and it wouldn't feel important anymore. So I wouldn't mention it. Not because I didn't care. Because the instinct wasn't automatic anymore. We both adjusted to the quieter rhythm. Without discussing it. Without noticing it clearly enough to name it. One night, I was lying next to her in bed while she scrolled through her phone. She laughed at something. Not politely. Genuinely. And I waited for her to turn the screen toward me. She used to do that automatically. Show me the meme. The message. The random comment. But she didn't. She kept scrolling. And I didn't ask. That part matters. I didn't ask. Because somewhere inside me, I already knew the update wasn't meant for me first anymore. It wasn't rejection. It was reorientation. I started thinking about how updates work. You don't consciously choose who to tell first. It just happens. Something happens, and your mind moves towards someone. That person becomes the default. At some point, I stopped being her default, and she stopped being mine. Not dramatically, just gradually. The realization came in the most ordinary way. She went away for a weekend with friends. I stayed home. The apartment felt fine without her. Quiet, but not empty. She texted a little, sent a couple photos, but not like she used to. When she came back Sunday night, she looked energized, bright, like something had expanded. She hugged me, but I felt it then. She hadn't missed me the way I thought she would. And that's when the thought finally formed clearly. She didn't need to update me anymore to feel connected. Her life was moving without that reflex. And I hated how calm that realization felt. I didn't confront her. What would I say? You don't text me enough, sounds petty. You don't think of me first, sounds insecure. And technically, she hadn't done anything wrong. She was still kind, still affectionate, still there. But presence and participation aren't the same thing. And participation had thinned. Months passed. We functioned well. No big fights. No betrayals. Just less spontaneity. Less urgency. Less of that feeling that something wasn't complete until shared. I started wondering whether this was just maturity. Maybe real love isn't about constant updates. Maybe it's quieter. But then I'd see her on the phone with a friend, animated, mid-story, describing something that had happened hours earlier. And I'd realize she still had that instinct. It just wasn't pointed at me. There was an evening when everything felt painfully clear. We were sitting on opposite ends of the couch. TV on, both half paying attention. She got a text and smiled immediately. Started typing fast. I don't know who it was. It didn't matter. What mattered was the speed, the urgency, the way she leaned into it. I tried to remember the last time she'd leaned toward me like that over something small. I couldn't. And that silence inside me said more than any argument could have. When we finally talked about it, it was calm. She said she felt distant lately. I nodded too quickly. Relief washed over me. Because I wasn't imagining it. She didn't accuse me of anything. I didn't accuse her. We just described the same absence from different angles. We had both stopped being each other's first call. And neither of us knew how to get that back. After she moved out, I expected devastation. Instead, I felt recognition. Like something that had been ending quietly for a long time had finally caught up with itself. I missed her. Of course I did. But more than that, I missed the version of us where updates were instinct. Where something small happened and my hand moved toward my phone without thinking. Where she did the same. Now, sometimes, something happens during my day. A strange interaction. A thought that doesn't matter. And I still feel the urge to tell someone. Not her. Just someone. Because the instinct to share never fully disappears. It just waits for a place to land. And I think that's what I've come to understand. I didn't lose her all at once. I lost being the person she thought of first. The person she needed to narrate her life to in real time. And that loss didn't scream. It whispered. Until one day, I realized I had become someone she could update later. Or not at all. And that's a different kind of heartbreak. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't break anything. It just rearranges everything. I was still there. So was she. We just stopped reaching for each other first. And by the time we noticed, it already felt normal. And I think that's the part I'm still trying to understand. How something can fade so gently that you don't even know you're missing it. Until it's already gone. I keep going back to the middle. Not the beginning, because that's easy to romanticize. And not the end, because by then we were already careful with each other. It's the middle that confuses me. The stretch of months where nothing looked wrong. Where we still kissed goodbye in the morning. Still asked what the other wanted for dinner. Still fell asleep, facing the same direction. If someone had taken a photo of us then, it would have looked stable, normal, maybe even solid. And that's what makes it hard to explain. Because from the outside, we didn't drift. We just quieted. There was a time when she used to call me before forming an opinion. That's something I didn't appreciate enough. She would say, "Okay, tell me if I'm overreacting." And then she'd describe a conversation from work or something her sister said, or some small misunderstanding with a friend. She wasn't asking for advice. She was inviting me into the process, into the forming of the feeling. I was there while her thoughts were still soft, still flexible, and somewhere along the way, that stopped. She didn't ask if she was overreacting anymore. She told me what she'd already decided. That shift sounds subtle, but it changed everything. Because once someone processes their life without you, You become an audience, not a participant. I try to be fair about it, because I know I changed too. I stopped bringing her half-formed worries, stopped sharing things I wasn't sure about. I'd think something through on my own first, decide how I felt, then maybe mention it later. And sometimes not at all. It wasn't intentional. It just felt easier, cleaner, like I didn't want to burden her with thoughts that weren't fully organized. But that's what we used to do for each other, hold the unorganized parts. And we slowly stopped doing that. There's a moment I remember clearly. It was late. We were both tired. She was brushing her teeth and talking to me through the mirror about something that had happened that day. But the way she told it felt finished, like she had already told someone else, like I was hearing the second version. And I realized I had missed the first, the raw one, the one where she didn't know yet how she felt. And instead of asking about it, I just nodded. I didn't want to admit that I felt slightly behind in her life. Behind. That's the word. Not excluded. Not rejected. Just a step behind. I started noticing that she didn't reach for her phone to text me during the day the way she used to. Not because she didn't care, because there wasn't the same reflex. And I tried to tell myself that living together changes things. You don't need constant contact when you'll see each other in a few hours. That made logical sense. But emotionally, it felt different. When you're someone's first update, you feel integrated. When you're someone's later summary, you feel adjacent. And I didn't know how to say that without sounding fragile. I remember one afternoon when I had a rough meeting at work. It left me unsettled in a way I couldn't explain. I stared at my phone for a minute, considering whether to text her. I didn't. I told myself I'd talk to her that evening. But by the time I got home, the feeling had dulled. It didn't seem worth bringing up. So I didn't. And that's when it hit me. I didn't need to update her anymore either. I wasn't saving moments for her the way I used to. I wasn't carrying stories home in my head. They dissolved before I got there. That realization scared me more than noticing her shift, because it meant this wasn't happening to me. We were both stepping back, quietly, symmetrically. There's something unsettling about how mutual it was. No one pulled away dramatically. No one chased. We just adjusted. I think sometimes people imagine distance as one person withdrawing and the other fighting to keep things close. That wasn't us. It was more like two people slowly lowering their voices at the same time, until conversation became background noise, and then silence, but a comfortable silence. That's what makes it complicated. We weren't unhappy. We weren't tense. We were just less involved, less curious, less urgent. I've tried to pinpoint when I stopped being her first call, when something happened and she reached for someone else instead. But I can't, because I probably did the same. I started talking to friends more, sharing things with coworkers, letting conversations unfold elsewhere. Not because she couldn't handle them, because it felt natural. That's what hurts the most. It felt natural. The shift wasn't forced. It wasn't dramatic. It just fit. And when something that used to feel essential becomes optional without friction, that's hard to look at. After she moved out, I thought about updates differently. I'd be in a grocery store and see something she used to like. My hand would move toward my phone automatically, then stop, because there was no longer a place to send it. And I realized that the absence of updates is more noticeable than the absence of a person. The silence where sharing used to live feels louder than the empty side of the bed. Sometimes I replay early memories and wonder if I imagined the intensity of that instinct. But I know I didn't. I remember the way she used to text me mid-sentence. The way she'd say, "Wait, I have to tell you something." And I'd feel chosen, needed, included. It's a specific feeling. Being the person someone thinks of first. You don't notice it while it's happening, but you notice when it's gone. I think what unsettled me most was how ordinary everything stayed. We didn't break up because of betrayal. We didn't argue about the future. We didn't uncover some hidden incompatibility. We just stopped narrating our lives to each other in real time. And without that narration, connection thinned. Love didn't vanish. It just stopped updating itself. And eventually, it felt like we were both maintaining something that no longer moved naturally. When I think about her now, I don't feel anger, or even sharp sadness. I feel awareness. We didn't collapse. We completed something. And maybe completion doesn't always look dramatic. Maybe sometimes it looks like two people quietly becoming less central to each other's daily thoughts. Less necessary. Less automatic. Until one day you realize you haven't updated each other in weeks. Not because you can't, because you don't instinctively need to anymore. And that's the part one still sit with sometimes. Not the breakup. Not the goodbye. but the gradual moment when I became someone she didn't need updates from. When I stopped being the person she thought of first, and she stopped being mine. There wasn't a single day that caused it. No obvious turning point. Just a slow rearranging of attention. Until the instinct was gone. And everything still looked the same. Except for that. Except for the quiet space where updates used to land. And sometimes, late at night, I still wonder when exactly that space emptied. But I don't think there's an answer. I think it just happened. Softly. Gradually. Until we were both living full days that didn't require the other to understand them in real time. And by then, there was nothing left to interrupt. Nothing left to reach for. Just two people who had once narrated everything to each other. Now moving through their lives alone. Without needing to say it out loud. There's something strange about realizing that what you miss isn't the person exactly. It's the instinct. The reflex. The automatic reach. I used to think heartbreak was about absence. About not seeing someone at the table. Not hearing their keys in the door. But this was different. I missed being included in the small, unnecessary moments. The moments that didn't carry weight on their own, but meant something because they were shared immediately. I keep thinking about how updates work. They're not announcements. They're not even important. They're interruptions. A thought appears, and you don't finish it alone. You pass it to someone else before it fully forms. That's what we stopped doing. We stopped interrupting our own days for each other. And once that stopped, everything else felt intact but hollow. There was a week, maybe a month before we officially ended things, when I started noticing how complete her days felt without me. She'd come home and talk about things that had happened, but the stories felt closed. Wrapped. She didn't need my reaction to feel settled about them. She didn't need my input to process them. She wasn't holding anything open for me. And I realized I wasn't holding anything open for her either. That's what frightened me. Not that she didn't need me, but that I didn't need her in that specific way anymore. I wasn't saving parts of my day for her. I wasn't thinking, I can't wait to tell her this. And that felt like a quiet betrayal. Even though no one had done anything wrong. I think there's a moment in every long relationship when you stop being surprised by each other. At first that feels like closeness. You know their reactions. You know what they'll say. You know their tone before they speak. But eventually, familiarity replaces curiosity. And once curiosity fades, updates feel less urgent. Why tell someone something if you already know exactly how they'll respond? That thought sounds harmless, but it slowly removes the need to share. I remember sitting across from her at dinner one night. Nothing tense. We were talking about practical things. Bills. Weekend plans. A friend's birthday coming up. And I realized we hadn't talked about anything internal in days. No half-formed fears. No uncertain thoughts. No, I don't know why I feel this way. Just logistics. We were still kind. Still respectful. Still affectionate in small ways. But emotional participation had narrowed. And neither of us seemed panicked by it. Which might have been the clearest sign. After she left, I went through this quiet phase of noticing my own habits. I'd experience something during the day and still feel the impulse to share it. Not always, but sometimes. And when that impulse came, it startled me. Because it reminded me of what had faded. The desire to narrate. To say, you won't believe what just happened. To send a picture of something mundane. To pass along a thought that didn't need analysis. That instinct is fragile. I didn't understand that before. I assumed it would always be there if love was there. But love can stay while instinct changes. And when instinct changes, connection follows. I don't think we failed. That's something I've repeated to myself enough times that I believe it. We didn't mistreat each other. We didn't betray trust. We just stopped needing updates to feel connected. And that shift is almost impossible to fight. Because how do you ask someone to need you more? How do you request that someone feel urgency about telling you something small? You can't. It either exists or it doesn't. And when it disappears quietly, you're left with something functional but thinner. Sometimes I wonder if we could have reversed it. If we'd named it earlier. If I'd said, I miss hearing about things while they're happening. But even that feels complicated. Because by the time I was aware enough to say it, the instinct was already fading in me too. I wasn't reaching for her the same way. I wasn't calling midday just because I felt like it. We were both adapting to independence inside the relationship. And independence, when it grows too comfortably, can replace intimacy without announcing itself. There's a moment that still stays with me. I was walking home alone after work. Nothing special had happened that day. Just ordinary meetings, ordinary conversations. And I realized I hadn't thought once about telling her anything. Not because I was upset. Not because I was distant intentionally, because my day had felt complete without sharing. That realization hit gently, but it lingered. For years, part of my day had always been shaped by the thought of telling her later. Now it wasn't, and that's when I knew something fundamental had shifted. After the breakup, people asked if I was okay. I said yes, and I meant it, not because it didn't hurt, but because the hurt had already happened slowly. The ending just caught up to what had been quietly true. We didn't stop loving each other. We stopped narrating ourselves toward each other. And without that narration, connection lost its momentum. Sometimes I still catch myself forming updates in my head. Small things, unimportant observations. And instead of feeling lonely, I feel aware. Aware of how much those small impulses mean. How much closeness lives in the unnecessary sharing. In the mundane. In the you won't care about this, but. Because when someone does care about that, that's intimacy. I became someone she didn't need updates from. And she became someone I didn't instinctively narrate my day to. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't feel like rejection. It felt like something settling. Like two lives gradually becoming self-contained again. And maybe that's what long relationships risk most. Not conflict. Not betrayal. But quiet self-sufficiency growing too strong. I don't know exactly when it happened. I don't think there was a single moment. Just a series of days where sharing felt slightly less necessary. Slightly less urgent. Until it felt normal not to. And by then, there was nothing left to fight. Nothing to accuse. Nothing to repair. Just the understanding that we had both become people who could live full days without needing the other to witness them in real time. And that realization didn't explode. It settled. Softly. Like something that had been true for a while. Finally spoken inside my own head. And sometimes, late at night, I still sit with that thought. Not angrily. Not even sadly. Just trying to understand how something so small, the loss of everyday updates, could quietly change everything. And how we didn't even notice it happening. Until there was nothing left to say.